It all started on a Tuesday, one of those Tuesdays that looks like Monday, you know? I was there in my peace, just trying to wash the yard and enjoy the silence of my street, which is duller than a sales channel at 3 in the morning. Then she appeared, that woman who lives as if she were the unelected president of an imaginary country called the Residents Association. Yes, that's her, the one who inspects other people's recyclable waste, who measures the length of her neighbors' lawns with a tape measure, and has the annoying habit of saying, "This is against HOA regulations," as if it were the Constitution of the United States. Only this time she came with a more epic mission, to stop me from digging a hole in my own backyard. And it wasn't just any hole. It was a personal project, a brilliant idea I had after watching 3 documentaries and 2 videos on TikTok about therapeutic mud baths. I decided to turn a corner of my backyard into a mini mud pool. Real mud, water from a hose, earth, and a dream. Because, right, if people pay a lot of money to go to a spa and get muddy, why not do it for free in your backyard? But no, according to the goddess of suburban order, it was an attack on the visual harmony of the neighborhood. Visual harmony, you see, coming from someone who paints their own gate, a color that can only have been inspired by cat vomit. The woman invaded my yard as if she were a CIA inspector. She didn't even clap her hands or ring the bell. She asked if I had official permission from the HOA to build a waste pool. Yes, she called the mud pool a waste reservoir. I looked at her and thought, this lady has a vitamin D deficiency. No one in their right mind gets up at 7 in the morning to inspect other people's pits. The most surreal thing was when she threatened to report me. She said that this could attract snakes, rats, and other venomous animals. And look, if anyone there looked like a venomous animal, it wasn't the clay, it was her. But I took a deep breath, held back the debauchery, and let her speak. What I didn't expect was the next level of insanity. Cut to the next day. I'm enjoying myself, testing the consistency of the mud. Because, yes, this requires technique. When I hear a scream, loud, desperate, that scream that the soul gives when it realizes that pride has slipped along with the body, I run to the bottom, and what do I see? The woman up to her hips in my mud pool, with her legs stuck in a position that even yoga can't explain, screaming as if she'd fallen into quicksand, but it was just mud, people. Mud and a bruised ego. The scene was a mixture of Mexican soap opera and cartoon. With every attempt to get out, she sank deeper. The mud became her biggest enemy. And look, I've never seen someone so desperate to keep their dignity with half their body buried in mud. It was a tragic dance of waving arms, disheveled hair, and disconnected words, all while the neighborhood birds watched in respectful silence. Or debauchery. Who knows? And you think she asked for help? Obviously not. She ordered it, as if I were an employee hired by her. "Get me out of here now!" she shouted, with that authority that only those who think they're in charge of everything have. Me? I pretended to think. I looked like I was assessing the legal risks of touching her without gloves, because if there's one thing I've learned living here, it's that this woman is the type to sue for cross-breathing. The irony of it all? It was she herself who slipped, tripping over her own ego, trying to get close to the proof of the crime so she could take photos and attach them to the complaint she was going to send to the HOA. The universe has a sense of humor that I respect. Now imagine the situation. A woman stuck in the mud, shouting orders, full of rage, and me with my cell phone in my hand, calling not the police, not the fire department, but the tow truck, because that's exactly what I did. I called the tow truck, explained the situation, and heard the embarrassed silence on the other end of the line. It took the attendant a few seconds to understand whether it was a hoax or a real drama. When he realized I was serious, he let out a, "We'll sort it out." Meanwhile, the neighborhood was starting to peek through the windows. And you know what it's like in an HOA neighborhood. Gossip is an Olympic sport. In less than 15 minutes, there was already a group of 3 ladies making mental notes to spread the story over afternoon tea. The arrival of the tow truck was the highlight of the circus. A huge truck, with one of those hydraulic platforms that usually pull out SUVs stuck in the swamp, pulled up in front of my house with a calmness that made me wonder if it was real. The driver, a middle-aged man who looked like he'd seen too much in his life, got out of the vehicle, looked at the scene, and let out a, "What the hell?" The woman was still there, of course, slumped almost to her waist, with her arms raised to the sky as if she were invoking the gods of the condominium. The anger in her eyes seemed to have created an extra layer of crust on the surrounding clay, and yet she wouldn't let up. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" she shouted. Yes, I did. Someone who fell face first into a pool of mud on her own, and now wanted to blame the world. The tow truck driver, trying to keep his composure, asked if it was a medical emergency. She said no, that she was fine, but that she was going to sue everyone for the public humiliation. I almost gave her a standing ovation, because for someone who cares so much about the aesthetics of the neighborhood, she was putting on a show worthy of a season finale. They tried to pull her off. Rope, strap, everything. But the mud was compacted in a way that seemed to have sealed a pact with her. A mixture of mud, ego, and stubbornness. With each pull came a barrage of insults, accusations of negligence, and veiled threats about the association's regulations. All this while the mud plopped, and she sank another centimeter. I swear I thought about throwing soap around it, like a baptism of humility, but I stopped myself. Meanwhile, the neighbors began to approach, little by little, pretending they were just passing by. There was a lady who stopped with her dog right next to her. The animal didn't even pee. She just stood there, watching the drama as if it were a live reality show. Another, wearing a kitchen apron, claimed she was taking cake to her daughter. No cake, no daughter, and in no hurry to leave. The irony was that the woman always thought she was above everyone else, the one who knows everything, who is in charge, who even supervises the position of her car in the garage. And now she was standing there like a decaying statue, shouting orders at everyone as if she still had some control over the situation. I confess, with a light heart, that I took photos, lots of them. Not to post, of course, I'm not mean, but to keep. An eternal reminder that sometimes the universe gives you the answer you never had the courage to say out loud. The tow truck driver called for backup. He called his colleague, described the situation, and ended with a, "No, bro, you need to see for yourself. It looks like one of those Russian YouTube videos." 15 minutes later, the second truck arrived. The woman was already hysterical. She said she was going to call the lawyer, the mayor, the president of the State Residents Association, if there is such a thing. That's when the police arrived. Not because anyone called. They were passing by. And, of course, they saw the circus. They pulled over, got down with that calm gait of someone who is used to people outside the house. They asked what was going on. She tried to explain, but in the middle of her speech about violation of public property and attacks on the institutional dignity of the HOA, one of the policemen looked at me and asked with a little smile, "Is that your pool?" I said yes, in my backyard, on my lot, with my water, my land, and my peace that she tried to sabotage. The policeman turned to her and said, "So you're trespassing on private property?" She froze. For the first time, she was silent for more than 10 seconds. A miracle. The woman's rescue took almost 2 hours. When they finally managed to pull her out, she emerged from the mud looking like a clay sculpture. Her hair stuck to her face, her clothes were soaked, and she looked like she had lost the election for a position that never existed. And yet, she came out of the yard with her nose held high, as if he were the victim of a rural terrorist attack. The most surreal thing came later. The next day, I received a notification. Not an apology, not a thank you, but from the HOA itself, claiming that my mud pool posed a biological risk and could inspire dangerous behavior among the residents. In other words, the woman gets stuck. It becomes a joke in the whole neighborhood. It becomes a meme in WhatsApp groups, and they still try to blame me. They sent me a list of recommendations. It included install containment fence and formal warning in case of repeat offenses. I thought that after becoming a human clay sculpture, she would back off, rethink her priorities in life, maybe even go to therapy. I was naive. The woman came back worse. It was as if the clay had activated a primitive instinct in her, something along the lines of, "Nobody dirties me and I get away with it." And of course, who became the target? Me, the person who just wanted to play home spa in the backyard. The following weekend, I was hanging out the washing when I saw a car pull up in front of my house. A pretentiously chic sedan, with that HOA sticker stuck on the back like a seal of quality. Out of it comes a guy with the face of a bored accountant, a clipboard under his arm, and a stride that's too determined for someone who's just visiting a resident. He came with that bureaucratic smile that stinks of a useless meeting. He said he had come to make a technical assessment of the irregular structure in your yard. I looked at him, looked at the clothesline, turned back to him and said, "Are you talking about my clothesline or the mud pool?" He didn't laugh. He just handed me a piece of letterhead with the HOA's ridiculously formal symbol. A document, 3 pages of pure venom, accusing my mud-filled hole of being an environment conducive to the proliferation of disease vectors, as well as threatening progressive fines if the removal is not carried out by the end of the month. At that point, I wanted to laugh, but I was so indignant that it made me thirsty. Because, you see, the woman invades my house, buries herself in the mud on her own, becomes the butt of jokes in neighborhood groups, and I'm the one who gets fined? The height of clowning. But it doesn't stop there. As if the roll of the fine wasn't enough, the micro-retaliations began, the kind that no one takes responsibility for, but everyone knows where they came from. The first was the garbage. A torn garbage bag right in front of my garage, with fruit peels, old newspaper, and, I swear, a woman's beige panties wrapped around a rotten orange. A visual message, perhaps. Or just plain disgusting. Then came the anonymous note stuck to my gate. Certain behaviors are not welcome in this community. Written in a font that screamed, "Resentful woman with too much free time." And the best thing, printed in Times New Roman font, which shows that, as well as being spiteful, the creature was traditional even in typography. There was also an attempt at sabotage worthy of Series B. Someone clogged up my letterbox with dry cement. That's right, a solid gray block, with the bills and flyers all fused into a single monument of frustration. And with each new attack, I felt more certain. She was orchestrating the whole thing, as if the fall into the mud had been my personal fault, as if my clay had symbolically beaten her pride, and now she needed to take revenge on the clay and the owner of the clay. The most bizarre part? She started spreading the word around the neighborhood that I was cultivating illegal activities. Nobody knew what that meant exactly, but all it took was for her to whisper that phrase full of malice in 3 different ears, and, within 48 hours, my house was already the subject of speculation in the neighborhood Facebook group. Some said I raised pigs. Others swore I was growing a hallucinogenic mushroom in the basement. One lady asked if it was true that the clay was brought in by truck from Mexico. Yes, from Mexico, because Mexican clay is more subversive, apparently. I became the odd man out. Children began to avoid passing in front of my house. A father crossed the street, pulling his son by the arm just because the boy asked if this was where the man from the mud pit lived. And all this caused by a woman who can't accept that her high heels have sunk along with her sense of superiority. That's when I decided to fight back. Not with violence or gossip, but with strategy. If she wanted to turn my yard into a matter of state, I was going to treat it as such. I went to the town hall, opened a protocol, requested an official mapping of my land. I paid the fee, waited for the working days to pass, and received a fresh document back saying, in no uncertain terms, that my property was in compliance, with no environmental, health, or moral violations. Ah, the feeling of opening that envelope was better than any mud bath. I almost framed that paper, and I didn't stop there. I hired a gardener just to cover the edge of the clay pool, planted some daisies around it, and put up a little sign: therapeutic area for relaxation and connection with nature, restricted entry, in 3 languages, just to show the level of classy provocation. The following week, she drove past, very slowly, looking at the yard like someone seeing a work of art they don't understand. I waved at her with a glass of juice in my hand, in the "good life, huh, neighbor" style. She pretended not to see, but I did. I saw the look of someone who has lost, the look of someone who fell face first into the mud and couldn't get up with any dignity. After so many failed attempts to turn me into the villain of a story she herself created and staged, I thought she would finally accept that she had lost, that maybe it was time to collect herself, rethink her life, take a gardening course or something else that would fill the existential void that made her so dedicated to overseeing other people's lives. But no, the woman decided it was time for the final act. And like any good antagonist who refuses to leave the scene, she wanted a dramatic ending. So what did she do? She tried to organize a special meeting of the HOA with a single goal: to force a vote to approve a new rule banning unregulated aquatic facilities that cause negative visual impact and collective health risk. Translation: ban anything like my mud pool. And of course, with retroactive validity, to force me to remove mine. Yes, she wanted to rewrite the past with bureaucracy. She sent leaflets through letterboxes, all written in a tone bordering on hysteria. They said that my well, which had once become a pool, then a crater, and was now a well, was depreciating the properties in the neighborhood. That she, as a concerned leader, couldn't allow the value of her property to fall because of the irresponsible actions of a neighbor who doesn't understand the principles of civilized coexistence. The leaflets came with a blurry photo of me from the back, watering the daisies I had planted around the mud. A scandal, clearly taken with a zoom and little dignity. I even thought it deserved a frame. How comical it was. But the best was yet to come. She arranged the meeting for a Saturday at 8 a.m. in the community hall. I, like any citizen aware that I would be the target of the assembly, made a point of attending. I was showered, well-dressed, with a debauched smile on my face, and the official document from the town hall under my arm, the one that said my yard was in perfect compliance, just the way she hates, legalized and protected. The hall was full. Curious people, gossipy people, pensioners who love a laugh, the couple who only go to meetings to steal biscuits from the cafe. Everyone was there. And she, on the makeshift stage, was already warming up her lungs to give her speech. The microphone was squeaking. The pose was that of a suburban martyr. She began by talking about the traditions of the neighborhood, the harmonious aesthetics of the houses, the importance of maintaining a high standard of coexistence. And then came the moment she had been waiting for. She pointed at me in the middle of the audience with that thin, venomous finger, as if to exorcise me. This resident has turned his home into a grotesque spectacle of carelessness and contempt for the rules, she said, her voice shaking with barely contained emotion. Some of the neighbors nodded, others just looked at each other, as if thinking, here comes another chapter of this soap opera. I let her finish the whole monologue. Only then did I get up, calmly. No hurry. I walked to the front with my paper in my hand and asked if I could speak. She snorted, said it was inappropriate, that the agenda was specific, but the people were already more interested in my paper than in her speech. I climbed up on the small step they were using as a stage, held up the document, and read it out loud. The City Council certifies that there are no irregularities or risks associated with the area in question. The owner is within the legal limits of residential use and landscaping. The silence was delicious. She remained static, her mouth ajar, her eyes bulging as if she had just witnessed a miracle in reverse. The meeting turned into a murmur, then muffled laughter. One gentleman even let out a "well done" and clapped his hands discreetly. But she didn't back down. She tried to change the focus. She said that the issue was moral, not technical, that what was at stake was the spirit of the neighborhood, collective sense, decorum. Oh, how she loves that word, decorum. The woman who was pulled out of a mud pit by a winch was now talking about decorum. Hypocrisy oozed more than the mud in my backyard. In the end, she proposed a vote. She wanted to approve the new rule, even with my document. But then came the plot twist she hadn't expected. Nobody voted with her. No one. Not even the two ladies who used to follow her like disciples. One said she preferred not to get involved in mud fights. The other said she was fed up with all the fuss over a hole in the ground. The rule was rejected by an overwhelming majority. I, of course, left calmly, with the same smile on my face, waved goodbye to her with two little fingers, and whistled away. Over the next few days, she disappeared. Not completely, of course. She drove by slowly, sometimes leaving a hint in the condo group. But that glow of someone who thinks they have the world in the palm of their hand, that's gone. The public defeat was too much, even for her. The fall was big and worse. It was in slow motion, with mud and an audience. The mud pool is still standing. Now, with an extra plaque, area awarded the 2025 Patients Trophy by the HOA. I made that award up, of course, but who's going to argue? And I'm still here, with my clay, my yard, and my peace. Because sometimes life just needs a well-timed fall in the right place to put everything back on track. And if it's into a pool of mud, even better.